Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boom Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today talking about head coaching. I kind of went back and forth. Is this strictly Bears topic? But I knew it wasn't, and so made it a news topic because this coaching cycle, man. And I mentioned this with when I talked about the Bills. This coaching cycle is kind of wild. And I would say it's nothing super new because all these things I've talked about before in terms of the trends of what we're seeing in the NFL. This is all the Sean McVay effect, if not somewhat more accurate. I wouldn't even say accurately the Kyle Shanahan effect, although you could say that. But when Sean McVay went to that Super Bowl, I don't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years after. This is what took over the NFL, and it's been bombing teams for a while. Like, I'm not even here to get into the sports media thing where let's go down the list and let's ask somebody to pull up some stats to back us up. Like, we know the history, we've seen it. Obviously, you had the Chiefs go on a pretty extended run where they've been able to win a good amount of the Super Bowls. We know Tom Brady had a miraculous Super Bowl within this time period. McVay did end up getting one. We seen the Eagles go to the Super Bowl twice, finally got one last year. So we kind of get in the last 10 years who's been winning and whatnot. And to me, it's not even necessarily about winning the Super Bowl, but what are these careers looking like, for better or worse? And this is a bit of a two-edged sword because on one hand, I want to talk about how quickly coaches get rid or how quickly teams get rid of coaches and how that's detrimental, much like the same conversations with the quarterbacks and just the whole nature of being impatient, this microwave attention span, which is so weird because majority of these owners are elder men, but really move with a impatient microwave mentality, outside of the Steelers, of course. So that's on one hand, but then on the other hand, you look at these coaches who have been in and out, the number of, this is the next hot young thing, and how many of them are just churned and burned. It's very similar to the conversation of quarterbacks. The difference is with quarterbacks, you have a very real factor in terms of the cap. The coaches don't count against the cap, and not even if they did, is not the biggest earner on the team. So this idea that you have like 2 seasons to get a Super Bowl or you're gone is insane. Not to say that any team has necessarily said that. Every team operates differently, but again, it all falls into the same conversation. So I don't want it to seem like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. It's all very real, nuanced, and complicated dynamics. Like, do I feel like a lot of these coaches were unfairly blamed and thrown out? Yes. But does it also speak to this idea that the whole Sean McVay model isn't perfect? Yes, both of those things can be true. So anyway, I've said all that stuff before. What I really want to focus on is kind of what a head coach should actually be judged on, because we know in online discussions and sports media, it all gets conflated and boiled down to the most simple surface level discussion where you have quarterbacks, okay, Super Bowl wins, MVPs. And even though with other players who are all part of the team, we don't really need to talk about Super Bowls. What? It's a quarterback stat. What are you talking about? That's a team stat. Coaches, wins, Super Bowls. That's it. So if you don't got this win, you don't got the Super Bowl, you're not a good coach. Are we being serious? And so, much like I talked about with McDermott and many others before, my perspective is a coaching perspective. You can call it bias all you want. I mean, those probably are going to be the best perspectives you can have, to be honest, if you're looking at the full picture. But for me, when I look at football, especially like from the outside looking in, where, it's not necessarily my job on the line, to me, and I've talked about the stages of different, of a team, the different stages of a team in terms of rebuilding, learning to win, blah, blah, blah. But to me, it's all about being competitive. And to that point, this year should show you that of everything else. And I was going to do this later, but I'll do this now. I mentioned in my community that this Super Bowl is low key really bad for the league. As I've learned more and more, and as I'm sure everybody feels, owners really owners have the biggest influence. I'll just put it that way. Because I don't want to say owners mess up the team, because not every owner does that. A lot of owners do what they're supposed to do and stay out of the way. But at the end of the day, owners have the biggest influence. That's kind of obvious to say, but and really thinking about how that looks and operates day to day, like, I think people don't realize just how impossible it is to get over that hump when you have an owner that's really messing things up. And so, as I talked about earlier, owners love to copy other owners. And owners love to, because that's what a lot of them do in business. A lot of them like to sit and wait and follow what other people are doing and follow trends. And so, either way, when they say it's a copycat league, they're talking about the owners. And so, when they see certain things in that particular year, that's what becomes problematic, because as much as it has been a Sean McVay model, there's still little things year after year that, depending on who wins the Super Bowl or who has success, that people want to, or owners want to copy for their team. So if you look at this Super Bowl, you have Mike McDonald, who I believe is on his third year. And then, of course, you got Vrabel on his first year. And what gets lost in the sauce is the context of what happens. And I've said this many times before. For the life of me, I do not understand why people downplay the schedule. I just do not get it. Like, the schedule is extremely important. Like, if you want to talk about cliche football coach talk, which I hate that label most of the time, cliche football talk is, it doesn't matter who's across from us. It doesn't matter who we play. They're all the same. They're nameless and faceless. No. Football is all about matchups. And what irks me is that in the same conversation, people say both. Oh, it's about matchups. And then they also, it doesn't matter who's injured. It doesn't matter who you play. Yes, it does. That probably matters more, probably top three. And so playing the Chiefs versus Mahomes versus Minshew matters. Playing the Cleveland Browns with Myles Garrett in and Myles Garrett out matters. So I don't understand why people downplay the schedules. It's very important. Now, you had the pay, and again, people love to be like, oh, you're a hater. No, like, I'm just pointing out, like, the truth. Somebody told me that the other day, because I just pointed out, like, they were having a conversation about the Patriots defense, and I was just like, also, these are facts, and they're like, oh, your butt hurt. Like, what am I butt hurt about? What are you talking about? I'm not, my team's not even the AFC. So anyway, the Patriots had like an historically weak schedule. I didn't even look through all of it. I just knew, throughout the year that they had a weaker schedule. Now, what did they also have? Like the number 2, 3, 4 pick, whatever in the draft. They're a top 5 team. So of course, by the way the schedules are made, they had a last place schedule. And so not only that, but then you get into the playoffs and you play the Chargers, who had a decimated O line. You play the Houston Texans, who had one of the worst offensive lines. And then you play the Broncos, where you have a backup, and then second half, pretty much no offense was happening. And then people look at the numbers and be like, oh my God, this defense is going crazy in the postseason. But then you compare it to the regular season, and those pressure numbers aren't the same. And so that context matters. The Seattle again, I'm not downplaying any of that, but Seattle Seahawks, the number of like, it was just funny listening to them talking about like Mike McDonald in terms of the roster. And I'm like, let me double check, but I'm pretty sure almost everybody y'all naming was already there when he got there, and I was correct. That's not to say that he didn't make any moves and, he wasn't a part of decisions since he's been there, but the Seattle Seahawks had a well-built team. Snyder is a top executive for a reason. He had a well-built team in terms of the pieces. Now, I'm not talking about, hey, Super Bowl ready-made championship and you just came in. Obviously not. And I'm not trying to say McDonald didn't do anything. McDonald did a lot, but then the conversation went to like all these players, and I'm like, those players were already there. And to be honest, that's a compliment to him more than anything, because they picked up a few pieces, but what he was able to get out of all these guys, especially defensively, that they were not getting to this level before he got there, is a compliment to him. And then you got Nick Emmanwori, who was a raw prospect. Everybody's like, well, what happened? What happened? Like, and that drives me crazy when we talk about the draft, bro. Like, I don't know what's going on in college coaching. I don't watch college football. I probably know more college coaches than NFL coaches, but I don't know what's going on in college. But it seems like in a lot of places, they not really coaching these dudes, especially these high athletic dudes, because you could tell he's just lost at South Carolina a lot of times. And so it's literally the exact same thing with Kyle Hamilton, who Kyle was a better college player. But I'm like, if you take him and you put him in a specific role, which is why everybody was like, well, he's got to, or with Kyle Hamilton, he could be this, he could be that, he could be that. And I keep telling everybody about these tweeners, especially D-back. You have to put them in a specific role and really let them hone in on those responsibilities. That's exactly what he did with Kyle Hamilton. That's exactly what they did with Nick E3. And yes, he's getting the most out of him. It's not, they was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. He was amazing in college. He was the most amazing in the draft. Everybody wants to bring up combine numbers. How many people with amazing combine numbers that didn't have a good year or out of the league? It ain't because he had combine numbers, people should have drafted him. You draft him if you got a plan, because he was a raw prospect. Anyway, all that to say, you don't want to look at this and be like, well, Mike Vrabel stepped in, that team was horrible, and they flipped it around. Not only the path to the Super Bowl, but then you have to look how much money they spent on free agent and what they brought in. That's not the same team from last year. Like, regardless of Drake May's development, whatever he might have made, you bring in the personnel to even be able to compete. And yes, you got a few pieces, but you're bringing a lot on defense. And then Josh McDaniels and what he's able to do is like, to look at it and be like, first of all, to look at any first year quarterback to second year and be like, oh, I can't believe, he got better. That's silly. But then to look at a person in a whole new system, a system that is better, and be confused of why they look better is silly. Like, how many times are we going to do this? We already got Sam Darnold. We already know that story. People saw Mac Jones play with Kyle Shanahan. They were like, oh, who's that? Like, Those things matter. So yes, Josh McDaniels coming, that's a big piece of it. It's not as simple as, oh, bring in a new coach and it all flips. It's not that simple. And it's definitely not as simple as, hey, bring in an offensive guru, quarterback coach, and everything's going to change. Like, I don't understand it. So when I say the Super Bowl is bad for the NFL, it was a trend that I thought was dying that is now only getting more emboldened. I still don't think it's going to last forever. I mean, even if you look at some of the hires, like some of the stuff happening makes me feel nervous, but some of the stuff happening makes me feel hopeful. You got a guy who's never been a coordinator interviewing for head coaching jobs. What are we doing? Like, and don't even get started on the Phillip Rivers things. Whatever. That's more of a I won't say a gag, but that's more of a gag interview. Or an anomaly, I should say, because I said not to call it a gag. But you got real life people pulling quarterback coaches to interview for a head coach. And as I've said before, this was not a joke. This was not funny to say. People are treating head coaches like glorified quarterback coaches. And you're literally seeing a quarterback coach get head coaching interviews. Where do they do that at? I, for the life of me, cannot understand. Now, if you're like, hey, we got time to blow and we want to just, keep our eye out there and for whatever reason, so we're just going to go through everybody, whether it's a quick few hour Zoom interview or if it's a dinner, we're just going to go through everybody. That's one thing. But even then, why would you even fathom bringing him in to be a head coach? And so we're seeing that stuff more and more. And again, it's getting worse. But then, like I said, I see some stuff that makes you feel hopeful. Like, as much as people want to cry, like, even based on the quote unquote coaching stats that are important, Mike McCarthy's right up there with Tomlin and Harbaugh. Harbaugh, one of the most sought after. And I mean, you could talk about that whole deal with Baltimore, but he goes immediately, everybody wants him bad. Tomlin, if he would have been fired, everybody want him bad. McCarthy, everybody's like, how's he getting interviews? Like, have you seen this man's body of work? So he then gets hired. And then you got some other veterans out there too. And so as much as we are seeing that McVay model happen, we are seeing a big swing back towards the old guard. Because now we can get into it. What is it that a head coach does? Or head coach? Yeah. What does a head coach do? What is it that we should be actually grading on? And don't get me wrong, throughout this conversation, the game and the product matters. Now, to me, as I said, it doesn't matter as much as, oh my God, we have to have Super Bowl or you can't coach. That's not the case. It's all circumstantial. If you are fulfilling your duties in all the areas and we are put in positions to win or in positions to compete for the championship and it doesn't happen, sometimes that's the way the dice rolls. This idea that, oh, we just need a new direction, or the dumb Bills, we reached the ceiling with you, even though we're going to hire somebody from your coaching staff that you hired. We reached the ceiling with you. We just need a new voice. I don't believe in that, but we'll start off with that. So the number one thing, and I don't necessarily want to go call all of these in order, but the number one thing that it comes to my mind when I'm like, what is a head coach responsible for? What do I evaluate him on? The number one thing is the locker room. And the reason that's important is because if you do not have the buy-in of the locker room, nothing else gets done. Now, the important part is that you have the empowerment of ownership. You have teams where the owner, like a Cowboys, which is worst case scenario, but where the owner might be outspoken or the owner might be a little too involved to where the players know that. It's no different than any other work environment. The players notice that. And so if you out here as a head coach saying, I'm going to do this and you got to do that, and they see where your authority is being undermined, you set up for failure. There's not much you can do at that point. It's really not. And some owners can't help themselves. Some owners have to be part of it. They got to be part of it. And so there you go. But the locker room buy-in matters. So when they say a coach lost the locker room, if that's true, then yes, that is a fireable offense, because in that point, yes, we truly can't go any further. Which is why when McDermott got let go, I was like, this should be a lost the locker room situation, or where he really doesn't have a good relationship with Josh Allen. I was like, because anything else, this is a bad firing. And then they kept the GM, promoted him, and threw everybody under the bus about a player on the team. So you could judge for yourself whether that was just incompetence or if that was actual good firing. And then you also had players on the team come out angry that they fired McDermott. So you could judge for yourself. But either way, when stuff like this happens, that's what I feel like. Same thing with Harbaugh. I'm like, well, first of all, the discussions about him and Lamar been going on. And so I don't think that was a coincidence that ended up breaking up. So the locker room is number one. How you judge that? You judge that off the temperature of the players, usually through the captains, but also, if you're owner or GM, well, I don't want to say a GM because I don't like GMs being over coaches, but if you're an owner, if I'm an owner, I'm around the players. I might not be in the locker room every day, but game day, and so I'm talking to players. I should be talking to players. So you'll feel it, you'll hear it. But then on top of that, you talk to the captains, the people in charge. They tell you what the temperature is. And then I think it also comes out in the way the team speaks and moves. If they're speaking on the same page and using the same terms and all that coaches do, that's when you know there's a buy-in. And then there's a level of, again, what do people say? I guess I just call it buy-in, that on game day, that when things are looking, bad, where it might be over, some type of adversity, and that they are playing, like, yes, that could be a partial measurement too of the team buy-in. And you always see it early, like that first year, where it's the quarterback or whoever, like whatever little phrases you've heard from the coach, you'll see players repeating it. Now, does that stay up 5 years later? Are they doing Warriors come out and play with the Patriots in 4 years? We'll see. But those are some measurements of that. But then after that, when I think about a head coach, you get into the preparation. The preparation is very important. And so in preparation, I'm talking about practice and how you schedule that, and game planning. So practice, these two go hand in hand, but man, it's hard to say one is better, more important than the other, but they're in the same category. So practice, how does a team practice? And do you have a practice that's efficient, where you're able to get everything you have to do within those time constraints that the NFL has? Are you able to actually be productive in practice? It could be efficient, but are you getting good work in as well? Do you have a plan for injured people? What's your week look like that's set up? And explain, what's your thought process behind that? Do the coaches know what they're doing, which we'll kind of get to in a little bit. But yes, what's your practice structure? How are we practicing? And you do see that from the as a fan level. You can see some of that at training camp a little bit, and then sometimes in the interviews. But again, from the owner perspective, you got access to all that. How are these practice looking? Do we look prepared? Game planning, same thing. Like this idea that, okay, I'm an offensive guy, so I'm gonna go over here and we're gonna huddle up, and then defense does what it. No, as a head coach, your input and your time should be spent with both game planning, and you should, well, both special teams too. You should know what the coach's plans are, and you should sign off on it. When you get into those situations where it's like, well, I didn't know, like, or I wasn't sure what they were thinking, that should never happen. That is a failure on your part. Your game planning, how you go about game planning, comes from the head coach. You should be locked in and tapped in to all the game planning happening, and you should know what the coordinators are telling the players. You should know what the position coaches are telling the players. If you're a head coach and you walk past the D-line coach saying, when we see this week we want to play it like this, and you like, that's not what the D coordinator said to me, you need to handle that. Now, of course, you got some old school, yell them out coaches that are going to try to rip you apart right then and there or whatever. I personally don't think that's the right way to do it, but either way, you have to handle that as a head coach. You need to make sure that we are on the same page. And are the game plans quality? Do they make sense to you? Because at the end of the day, it falls on you no matter what. Whether you know or don't know, people are going to say it falls on you. So preparation, game plan, and practice. If that's looking sloppy, if it doesn't look efficient, if we're breaking rules, not, doing what we're supposed to, getting fines, if the players don't know the game plans, and that's another indication I should say too. Like, my players should be all on the same page of what we're doing this week, what we're planning on seeing. And as an owner, I'm not necessarily saying you need to pop quiz everybody, because as an owner is different. But that's the feedback you get from the locker room. That's the feedback you get from the coaches. That's the feedback you get from the front office people. Like, what are we seeing? So preparation, organization. And organization is a lot. I mean, well, the draft process, that can vary depending on the front office dynamics. But everything from the draft process to the off season, like, what do they call, voluntary workouts, to the mini camps, to the weightlifting program, to the nutrition program, to training camp, obviously practice and all that other stuff, but how you deal with injuries, health, like whether it's family stuff, travel, all these things, that's on the head coach. You should not only have a plan, like everybody talked about Belichick coming to North Carolina with his coaching Bible. Really, it is. You got to have a whole plan of how you plan on running things. So as an owner, A, do you have a plan? B, what's your rationale behind the plan? If I got a guy's like, here's what I do, and you can't explain to me why, then how am I supposed to expect you going to be able to explain it to everybody else? Because the organization piece of coaching, head coach, that's the entire thing. Can you communicate your plan effectively enough and teach it enough to where everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are and why? That is huge. And that seeps into the preparation part with the coaches, but everybody, the staff, from every level that work with the team. Do you have an idea and a plan for them? Have you communicated with them? How do you have the chain of communication set up so that they get their directions? And do they see your vision the way you set it up? Because bad coaching from the head coach spot is when you have breakdowns in communications and people are not on the same page. Organization, even though it touches a lot of areas, it comes down, can you get people on the same page? Then from there, so we got we got the buy-in of the locker room, we got the preparation, organization, in-game ability. This is the one everybody's more familiar with. So in game, we got adjustments, your ability to adjust. Right now, it's looking like a lot of teams really just wait to halftime, but whatever. The ability to adjust the game plan to what you're seeing. Clock management, which is one that people have honed in a lot on the last few years, because again, that's something that they can see. Play calling, if that's directly part of your duties or not. As I've said many times, and I hope people know this by now, there is no, the head coach just doesn't know what's going on. To be honest, the whole staff could know what's going on. If you really wanted to, you could have the whole staff on the same channel. Like, this is the NFL. This is billions and billions of dollars. They got the top technology. So, yes, even in high school, the head coach is on the channel on both sides of the ball. The head coach should know what's happening. And not only that, as I've said many times before as well, it's not just, sometimes it is, but it's usually not just one guy calling plays. Everyone thinks that. That's your responsibility. You're going to wear the responsibility for what you call, quote unquote. But it can be anybody that gives you suggestions. It could be players. It could be the linebacker coach saying, hey, their linebackers are doing this. You might want to run this play. And in those instances, the head coach needs to know his defense and as well as his offense and vice versa in special teams. This whole idea of a defensive-minded coach, offensive-minded coach, this is why I keep laughing at it. This is a head coach we're talking about. So they need to be able to look at the field and be like, hey, actually, let's start running some banjo. Actually, let's get into cover 3 when they line up like this. Whatever the case may be. And again, I'm not saying they got to call the plays, but you got to approve the plays. If you hear a play that you're like, I don't like that in this situation, then you got to handle that. So play calling, although it's sometimes, hey, I'm the play caller, I'm not, defense, offense, doesn't matter. You're still in charge of that play calling and what the structure is. Same thing. Like if it's a free for all and your coaching staff is just not operating well, you as the head coach need to figure that out. You need to have the meetings, the conversations, and set the structure to what's best. More times than not, it's offense and defensive staffs on their own channel. But you need to figure out, if it's me, maybe I want my offensive coordinator and defense coordinator on both sides. Like, whatever. So that's ultimately up to you. And then game time decisions, which I kind of put into, not clock management, but yeah, anyway, game time decisions. So going forward on fourth, timeout here, kick the field goal, all that stuff. Absolutely important stuff. Now, is it the end all be all like some people try to make it? Like, oh, well, this coach just really keeps messing up the clock. I don't believe it's the end all be all, but it is very important, especially if you got all your other ducks in a row. And then the other thing is, you got to realize you don't have to be the expert. It's on you to build the staff that you need. So if you need to not only, which I'll get into, know your staff, you need to know yourself. So if you know you're not good at clock management and you just keep doing the same mistakes with no change in your process, that is a bigger red flag to me than you telling me, hey, this is what I'm going to do to change that, to help that, and it still not work. Because, that I could understand more than you just like, yeah, it is what it is. Because then you don't know how to improve, and that's part of being a good head coach. So you can bring in a former coach. You could bring in whoever. You could bring somebody to be the consultant during the week. You could bring somebody to be in the booth to be like, hey, this is our guy. Obviously people bring in analytics staff, blah, 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 blah. Now, if it's a situation, and these are things that play or fans don't know, where the coach is like, hey, this is what I need to be successful. You say as an owner or whatever, no, I'm not paying for that, or we're not doing that. And then they go out and mess up. Then you throwing them under the bus. Much like we hear McDermott say, hey, this is what we need. These pieces we have is not going to work. And them basically like getting mad at him and saying, oh, well, you lost. Like, bro, he told you what he needed to be successful and you didn't want to provide it. So, in-game ability, all those different categories. Lastly, I would say personnel. So personnel, really, and you could say personnel, or you could just call it talent evaluation. Talent evaluation, let's call it this. Personnel. Talent evaluation is one part. Development is the other part. Now, I'm not going to get into this long rant about what player development means, because everybody keeps saying that. And obviously, they only say it with the quarterback. But develop this player, develop this player, develop this player. And yet, when I ask somebody, what does that look like? They cannot answer that. So how you going to tell me somebody's bad at something? You don't even know how to describe what it is. So anyway, player development, but it's also coach development. Player evaluation is also coach evaluation. And again, without trying to put an order on these besides the number one, this might be up there in the top 3, because you have to build that coaching staff. You have to, this is all from you knowing your own vision. So you not only have to do the personality part of what works with the team, what works with the staff, but you have to do the knowledge part. Is this person competent in what I want to do? And we see it too often. And sometimes it is the GM. Sometimes it is the owner, where it's like, hey, this guy's got a hot name or a good track record, or they worked with McVay, or they worked with Shanahan, so you got to hire him. Sometimes it's like that, and it's not a good fit. People get thrown under the bus. But when it is your ability and you're coming in and interviewing all that, you have to have an idea of the staff's available. Now, to me, I don't think, like, people talk about how much of a bonus it is if a head coach comes in with a whole staff mapped out and prospects. Cool. But really, I want, because especially most time, you don't even know all of them. And which is why coaches usually get the guys they know. I'm more so interested in, do you have the ability to sit down with a coach you don't know and evaluate their ability to coach? That's what I'm more interested in. Now, the player evaluation side, obviously there's a whole front office component. That collaboration looks different. But you still need to be able to identify talent in players. And some teams do it different, much like college, or how college, still kind of how college is. But some teams are more into the pro side than they are to the draft side. So sure, it's not the end all be all if you're not the best at identifying draft prospects. And ultimately, you got a whole front office staff for doing a lot of that heavy lifting. But you still need to be able to identify talent, because once you get the players, you need to be able to identify what it is they're good at. Because, as I said earlier, it ain't just, okay, this player has natural talent, they're just going to be great. No, it ain't just, hey, let me teach you some technique, now you're going to be great. No, you have to put players in a system that works for them. So you need to get a player and be like, okay, this job would work for you and what we're doing. Now, if you're constantly getting players that don't fit any role that you need, that's a problem between the GM and you. But in terms of just generally being able to identify what a player is good at, what their capacity is and all that, That's a big part. Now the last part is the coach development. That's the one no fans talk about. You have to be able to coach the coaches. And as I said earlier, there's nothing more important than your coaching staff being on the same page as you. Like, yes, organizationally, I want a coach that could communicate the vision all the way down to the towel boy. If my towel boy or ball boy, whatever, runs out to the white strip and trips up a ref and we get a 15-yard penalty or whatever for that, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. But more importantly than going all the way down to the ball boy or girl ball child, more importantly than that is the coaching staff. When you set the game plan, when you set the expectations, the game plan, are they echoing the same thing? That's where problems come in on any level. So you have to be able to coach the coaches. I say it all the time. The number of coaches that are out of position. Ben Johnson was a tight end coach, people. He's a tight end coach. Everybody's like, he's a quarterback whisperer. Yeah, he played quarterback, but he got into the league. Not got into, but he became an actual assistant coaching tight ends. And then we could go on and on and on about these coaches that are coaching different positions. So you got to be able to coach a coach, whether they got all the experience or none of the experience, whether they're out of position or they're in their level of expertise. You got to be able to coach a coach and to be able to teach to a point where your coaching staff is giving the instruction in the way and they're saying the information that you want given. So when we see these head coaches pacing around practice, looking at all this, people think they're just looking at the players. Yeah, they're also looking at the coaches too. And again, there's a lot of throwing under the bus, but those after season, like the Broncos just fired their OC. Now you're the number one seed. A lot of people could say, even though they didn't put up great numbers, a lot of people could say, man, look at Bo Nix. He's developed. They were the number one seed. They're doing something right. Let's get this guy as a head coach. They fired him. Like, those are real conversations. And they might be a little bit thrown on the bus, but those are real conversations more time than not. That's sitting down, going through our process, and not being on the same page. That's what that is. And you have to be able to identify that as a head coach. Whether it's in season or after the season, you have to identify where there's a break in the system, where somebody's not doing a good job of what you expect of them. And that's very important. So it's not just making good hires, it's also being able to coach that coach up. Because so let's say, who is it? Robert Saleh. He just took over the Titans job. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Dable took the Titans job. He took one of them jobs. But let's just say he took the Titans OC job. So Dable's coming off being a head coach for a little bit. Saleh was a head coach for a little bit. Maybe we never crossed paths. Maybe our coaching trees don't intersect. So I have to sit down with you, listen to what the system is. You know, I might have met you. I probably met you because they were both head coaches in New York. But whether I met you or not, let's sit down. Let's talk about process. Let's talk about your playbook. Let's talk about philosophy. You got to be able to interview that coach, understand what it is he's good at, what he's not good at, what he's thinking. Does it fit your vision? Okay, yes. Now, going into it, I know what things to look for. If you haven't had those honest conversations, or if you don't know that coach well, you don't know what to look for. I need to be able to be like, okay, you know, Dayball's good at this, but he's not so great at this. Okay, whatever it might be. It might be interpersonal relationships with players. It might be the way you communicate with staff. It might be the way you structure your game plan. It might be your third down passes, whatever. You need to be able to have those conversations, identify the problems, coach to coach. So this idea that a head coach comes in, huddles up on one side of the ball, and just lets the other side do what they want, that's a bad head coach if that's happening. Real head coaches, that's not how this works, especially on the NFL level. So to recap, the areas were the buy-in of the locker room. Then you got the preparation, practice, and game planning. You got organization of, communicating the vision to the whole organization and having a plan. Then you got in-game ability, clock management, adjustments, play calling, game decisions. And then you got personnel, player and coach development, player and coach talent evaluation. So that's the way I look at it. Those things are the things that matter. And so when we get into these conversations about head coach who deserve to be fired or whatnot, it's never about these things. And 80, 75% are things that fans have no access to. 60% might be things media don't have access to. So when we have these conversations, they're always lackluster, and they're going to be because you're not in the building. And so when you get a person that the players genuinely like and they genuinely feel confident in, and you get a coach that is really organized and has a plan for the team, and you get a guy who is constantly working with roster and coach turnover and making smart decisions in terms of his personnel, when he works well with the front office, and then you get to a point where you miss a field goal in overtime in the playoffs, or your quarterback throws an interception, or it snows crazy and then somebody fumbles, or whatever the cases may be, but you make a decision off that instead of actually looking at his ability to coach, that's the stuff that loses me. All right, so that's it for me. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around, get the convo started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.